Hello and a very warm welcome to Money Control. It's been a little over a month since India successfully concluded its G20 presidency. It was a year when over 100 cities and towns of India decked up and rolled out the red carpet for the who's who of the world. At stake was a consensus and many expectations. India, of course, managed the expectations rather well as it gently but very definitively pushed the agenda of the developing world. The one person carrying the burden of those expectations is India's star bureaucrat, Mr. Amitabh Kant. Many thanks, Mr. Kant, for joining us. Of course, you've worn several hats, a career that spanned several decades. You've been as much a part of the India story as anybody else in the government, in policy making. If we could ask you to look back to this on this one year when India was leading the G20 presidency, were there moments, were there times when you felt that India probably would not succeed in driving a consensus? Were there very difficult countries that you worked with where you felt that, okay, this is not going to happen and, we'll probably just have to make do with whatever we can come back with?
Well, not only me, but several people across the world thought that India will not be able to deliver because of the complex nature of issues, not merely the geopolitics, but there were vast challenges on climate. There were huge challenges on energy. All ministerials had not succeeded. And therefore, it was finally left to the leaders' level. And therefore, essentially, Sherpas who represent the leaders in the negotiations. And it was finally we had to sort out all these issues of climate, energy, many issues on geopolitics. And even when we finally succeeded on climate and energy to bring out a consensus, because multilateralism works on consensus. Everybody must agree. If one party doesn't agree, it doesn't work. So the great thing about India's G20 was that we've delivered what the Prime Minister wanted, which was that we should be inclusive, we should be decisive, we should be ambitious, we should be action-oriented. And therefore, at the end of it all, 83 paras, we've had 87 outcomes, we've had close to about 112 odd documents. So we have close to about...
So how many drafts did you tear up, or how many drafts were rejected before this final
So on
document?
one single para, let me tell you, one single para, which is the Russia-Ukraine para, we went through 16 drafts. It was finally the 17th draft where we forced the issue. But 16 drafts, we went through about 250 bilaterals. We must have gone through about 300 hours of negotiations.
Continuously,
non-stop.
Without a break.
Yeah, without a break.
300 hours of negotiations.
Non-stop. So it was really tough. It was not easy. We had to get everybody around. We had to do 250 bilaterals, one after another.
So besides China and Russia, which were the other challenging countries?
No, everybody was a challenge. We had to push back everybody. Other than emerging countries, because we worked with Brazil, we worked with South Africa, we worked with Indonesia, we got Mexico, Argentina, Saudi, Turkey all along with us. But eventually we had to push back G7 a lot. We had to push back Russia enormously. We had to push back China, everybody, and finally arrive at a good draft is one where you manage to push back everybody and arrive at a consensus.
Right.
Nobody should feel like a great winner. And at the end of the day, when you succeeded, everybody should own it. So the great thing about India's G20 presidency has been that everybody has owned the New Delhi Leaders Declaration.
Right.
So the United Nations is saying that we brought SDG up front. We've prepared an action plan. So that helps them in the implementation of the SDG. They greatly appreciate what we pushed through the Green Development Pact. If you look at, on the other side, if you look at COP28, we've laid the roadmap for COP28.
Right.
We've done all the spade work for them, so
Mhm.
it'll be easy walk for them as they go along now.
Mhm. Mhm.
And we've done all the work for women-led development. We've done
Yeah.
all the work for technology and digital public infrastructure.
Mhm.
Imagine there was no definition of digital public infrastructure. We brought the definition of digital public infrastructure. We've created a framework for it. And now digital public infrastructure can be rolled across the world and
Mhm.
taken to the global south and all the developing countries of the world.
It's commendable, and it's again, like you said, that nobody expected the G20 presidency to pan out the way it has panned out. If you were to identify three big wins for India
Hmm.
from this, from a perception point of view, from an actionable agenda point of view, what would you say there?
So, first and foremost, I think the biggest win has been that this is a living, breathing document for the global south.
Mhm.
The issue of developing countries, emerging markets, has never been brought center stage like India did. And I
Right.
think the Prime Minister really led from the front by arguing that African Union must become a member of the
Yes.
G20. So that makes it about close
Mhm.
to about 88 to 90% of the global GDP representation by G20.
Mhm.
We've, on every issue, we fought for the global south,
Mhm.
from uh, inclusive, sustainable, bold growth
Mhm.
to technology to multilateral development banks, which have the voice and representation of the developing countries. We fought all through for the global south. So I think that's the number one priority, which is a big win for India.
Mhm.
And secondly, I think women led development, because there is no multilateral document in the world which
Mhm.
has, in such an ambitious
Yeah.
and bold and courageous manner, brought out the issue of women empowerment, gender equality, women-led development.
Mhm.
I don't think there's any other document which has done
Mm.
this.
Mm.
And thirdly, because SDGs have taken a
Yeah.
big hit because of COVID,
Mhm.
only 12% of SDG are on
Right.
track.
Right.
We brought SDG action plan
Mhm.
center stage,
Mhm.
and we put it right
Mhm.
where it mattered, and we said the world needs to move forward on SDGs.
Right.
We've done two other spectacular things which are very important.
Mhm.
One is that both SDG and climate, and we push for the Green Development Pact.
Mhm.
This is the first time the leaders of G20 have worked around a Green Development Pact.
Mhm.
But both Green Development Pact, the tripling of renewable energy, the SDGs require more resources to flow in to the global south. And
Mhm.
therefore, our finance track has really pushed for uh, uh, bigger, better, and more effective multilateral development banks, which was very important.
Mhm.
And I think the results of this you'll see in the coming years.
Mhm.
We've really delivered on the ambition side.
Absolutely. The presidency was also at a very difficult time. A war continues between Russia and Ukraine, and currently we have a war going on between Israel and Hamas. Uh, Diplomatically speaking, it's been a very tough tightrope walk
Hmm.
for India during the G20 presidency. Currently, considering our global relations, with our relations with the Middle East and so on, what was the communication? What was the messaging that India was communicating to the world? Because India wants to be seen as an empathetic leader, wants to be perceived as a leader of the global south, took the voice of the developing world, yet it had to emerge also as a voice of conscience. So how did you manage that fine balance? And
So
do you
if
think you managed it?
no, so if you look at the para on Russia-Ukraine crisis, we call it planet, progress, people,
Mhm.
and prosperity. And we clearly say that the use or threat of use of force for territorial acquisition is not permitted. We've said that nobody should violate
Mhm.
other countries' territory. We've said that there should be political sovereignty, there should be political independence, there should be non-use of nuclear force. All this is very, very strongly stated. Those are very, very strong paras.
Mhm.
They recall the Bali statement, they recall the United Nations resolution, but they're very, very strong in their own way. They send out a clear message. So, what India has achieved as far as geopolitics is concerned, the United Nations and the United Nations Security Council has not been able to achieve. Nowhere have they been able to achieve a consensus like India did. So I think that's to the great achievement of India, its ability to straddle the world of G7, to bring emerging markets together, to bring China, to bring Russia, everybody together to be able to bring consensus on the table on very complex issues of the world.
Right.
These are very complex issues. I mean, climate, energy, SDGs. All these are very complex issues. The Green Development Pact was very, very complex. And we've demonstrated a great ability to bring everybody together and yet be very ambitious and be very inclusive.
Okay, moving on now from G20. Over several decades, as you've been part of the government, one of the key initiatives that you have conceptualized and executed has been Make in India. And now when you look back, there is a sense that private investment has not picked up to the degree that it could have picked up. Make in India, it has taken off in pockets because of the PLI scheme, but it could have done a lot more. I just want to get your sense on what can India do now going forward to ensure that we capitalize on this whole China Plus strategy. The world is looking at alternate destinations. How can India build on Make in India?
So three things. When we did Make in India, the basic objective was to have ease of doing business. A lot of work was done around ease of doing business, making things easier, scrapping of a lot of rules, regulation, processes, procedures. The FDI policy was totally opened up.
Right.
It led to a growth of FDI in India. And thirdly, I think our patent regime was liberalized. And today we have a lot of patent registration. So those are very notable achievements in the Indian context. And later, we worked around the production-linked incentive scheme.
Right.
And we've seen Apple, Samsung, many pharmaceutical companies all expand their production. And I think the PLI scheme will continue to deliver in the coming years in both electric manufacturing, advanced chemistry, cell, battery, and many more areas. There are two key issues which are very important to keep in mind. And one is that ease of doing business should be a constant process, not merely by the government of India, but by also the states.
Absolutely.
The states must take it as a challenge and they must scrap a lot of rules, regulation processes because a lot of action is in the states. And secondly, we must be very clear that we have to be a very integral part of the global value chains. That's how business is done across the world. And that means that you'll have to import thousands of items for the end product to be manufactured in India.
Right.
And over a period of time, then the value addition keeps increasing. Those 1,000 products which come in, because you have to produce to very competitive prices, they must come in just in time. They must come in at zero rates of duties so that the end product remains cheap. So we can increase our duties on products where we are the ultimate consumer, like furniture, etc., like food items and so on, where we are the ultimate consumers.
Sure.
But products which get into exports, it's very, very important that export items, particularly high value added items like mobile manufacturing, like electric vehicles, many other things, which we'll get into, and we need to get into these sunrise areas of growth.
Right.
Everybody must be very clear.
We should lower our customs duty on.
Those items have to be at zero rates of duties so that we become competitive in the export market. And therefore, India needs to be, every time we've grown on the back of exports. We need to really grow on the back of exports. We must become a leading exporter in the world.
Right.
And that means that you must be globally very competitive. And that's why leading economists will tell you that in a lot of components which come into the ultimate manufacturing have to be at zero rates of duties. But the ultimate products which are consumed where by Indians, those we must go vocal for local. Totally vocal for local. And in the long run, as we keep importing, we should attempt to become a manufacturer of those items also as we go along. But that
take time. It'll not happen
should take a
overnight.
process of that will take a process of, because it's a complex process of getting, because I mean, look at Maruti. When it came in from Japan, all items were manufactured there, but then we built up tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, tier 1 manufacturers, and then the entire value chain builds up, but it took a little time. And I think that process of taking time is a process which takes the next 5 to 6 years.
So, but we seem to be doing something that's completely the opposite, right? We've raised our trade barriers, we've increased our import duties, because we want to encourage make in India, and so it almost seems like we're doing the opposite of what you're suggesting. In fact, even in food, we have raised our export duties. We're not enabling farmers to export their produce because we want to bring inflation down. Tesla, India is really trying to get Tesla to come in, and Tesla has been vying for duty cuts. In your view, and we do know that there are meetings scheduled, in your view, what can India do, not only for Tesla, but when it comes to getting these big manufacturers to come and set shop? Because one of the issues that they come across is that different states have different rules, and that becomes problematic to navigate. And while we might have made some progress in ease of doing business, but there's still a lot that...
So Tesla's problem is very different. Tesla does electric vehicle manufacturing. Now, if you're importing a vehicle in its totality, the rates of duty in India are very high. I think they're in the region of about 135 to 140%. If you bring the vehicle in total, if you dismantle and assemble them in India, then the value comes down to about 45% or something.
Yeah.
The challenge with Tesla vehicles is that you can't. What they say is that you can't dismantle them, and therefore the duty rates are very, very high.
Right.
Now, the challenge is that Tesla should manufacture in India. Our aim should be that Tesla should manufacture in India. But Tesla says that it wants to test out the market for a period of 3 years or something, and it wants to bring down the duties to the same rates as they are assembled here. But I think what we should really work with Tesla is that we should really lay down a roadmap that we are willing to do this for a particular period of time, subject to your manufacturing in India, because the EV market is going to grow and expand in India. So the eventual objective of all this should be that eventually Tesla should manufacture in India.
Yeah.
It's like it
But
should
in
be a
terms
make
of
in India.
timelines.
Eventually Tesla should be a make in India electric vehicle for the Indian markets and export from India to the rest of the world.
So some of the issues with the PLI scheme was that the timelines were a bit unrealistic. And some of the schemes were rolled out during the pandemic, and that's why a lot of manufacturers could not take advantage of that. 3 years, they say, is not enough. So when you talk about Tesla or any other company for that matter, do you think India needs to probably take a slightly more long-term view and give slightly easier timelines, more realistic timelines in terms of manufacturing capabilities?
So let's first understand what the PLI is. The Production Linked Incentive Scheme says that India is not competitive in certain areas. Because it is not competitive, we are going to support you subject to your increasing your production by this percent, this percent, this percent for the next 5 years. If you keep meeting your targets, we'll support you for the next 5 years. But the scheme will be withdrawn after a period of 5 years. So you're giving a window for 5 years to make India a manufacturing nation. But my belief is that India should not have PLI across the board. India should make itself very competitive across the board in every sphere. Why should India not be competitive? Its turnaround time should be better. India has done a lot of work. Its infrastructure has improved. It's spent about 4% of its GDP, from 1% to 4% of its GDP on capex now. So the roads are good, the ports are better, you have airlines connectivity, you have airports. Now, there's a huge improvement in infrastructure. So PLI is meant only in some areas, some key areas where we were uncompetitive for a limited period of time. But the objective is not that you should have some centers of excellence in certain areas. The objective should be that we are going to make India the most productively efficient economy in the world. We are going to beat China in being the most productively efficient economy in the world. We'll make our logistics better. We'll make our roads better. We'll make the cost of production better. We'll have higher levels of labor productivity. We'll do away with all these outdated rules and regulation which the Prime Minister is focused on. That should be our objective, and that is what the Prime Minister is driven at.
So yes, we've really sorted things out where hard infrastructure is concerned. But when it comes to paperwork, when it comes to that basic ease of doing business, we have the taxman sending out notices right now with GST. In the month of September alone, over 50,000 notices were sent out. The penalties are massive. We are looking at a situation of where it almost the whole situation almost reeks of return of tax terrorism. I mean, that's the sentiment. So, as someone who's really worked and who's very passionate about making in India, doing business, making it easier in India, why is it there's such a disconnect between the grand schemes and the administration and the bureaucracy on ground?
So the Prime Minister is focused very heavily on ease of doing business. He has a big stake in that. He's the one who pushed us towards it. He believes in predictability and consistency of policies. He's pushed for faceless taxes, all this. And it's very important that to understand that we must have predictability and consistency of policy. If you don't have that, if you don't have predictability, you will not have manufacturing in India. And we've in the past had cases of Nokia. We've had in the past cases like Vodafone. We should be very, very careful to ensure that we should have predictability and consistency across in all areas where we have human intervention. In fact, we should not have any human intervention. We should all be digital intervention.
So there is a problem with that also. What's happening right now is the tax notices that are being sent out are AI generated. A lot of those notices with a huge penalty amount and their check boxes on what the notice is for, none of those reasons are ticked. So it's almost like that the assessee is wondering.
But anything which is digital can be set right, because I think the tax department will get to know what the flaws are and they will set it right. And I think every single department, whether it be the state, whether it be the central government, whether it be tax or DIPP or commerce or any department, all of us, it's incumbent upon all of us to ensure that there is predictability, there's consistency, there is ease of doing business.
Right.
Because eventually India can only grow as a manufacturing nation. In a nation where 42% of your jobs are coming from agriculture, you need to create jobs in manufacturing.
Absolutely.
So if we are able,
and you are a big believer in manufacturing.
Absolutely. India can't grow with 42% of your population in agriculture. You need to take population away from agriculture. They're poorly paid jobs. You need to take them into urbanization and into manufacturing. Right. Without that, India can't
services
grow.
Is not the answer alone.
Yeah. India must fire on all cylinders. India's manufacturing must grow. We should take our manufacturing to 25% of our GDP. Our services must continue to grow. Our urbanization must be smart urbanization, which should enable India to create many more jobs. And it's very, very important that we enhance our agriculture productivity. And agriculture productivity will require technology. It will require agro businesses. It will require movement of people away from agriculture into manufacturing. Without that, it will not happen. And without that, India can't grow at very high rates of 9 to 10% over a 3-decade period. And Amrit Kal, which Prime Minister has envisages all this. Technology, digitalization, getting into newer areas of growth. When he talks about electric vehicles, when he talks about batteries, when he talks about semiconductors, when he talks about a huge amount of digital leapfrogging, it's all these new areas of growth which he's talking about. Now, if we have to have predictability and consistency in all these areas.
So you mentioned the Prime Minister and his vision of making it easier to do business in India. 10 years ago, when he asked people to vote for him, he said, government should be about minimum government and maximum governance. You were heading a committee on asset monetization. There was a very ambitious plan. Disinvestment has been a big agenda of the government. And of course, cutting out red tape, right? When you look back of the when you look back to the 10 years of the Modi government, how do you think has the government fared on these three
Well, on
counts?
asset monetization, the year we started, we crossed the targets. We actually brought in InvITs, we brought in REITs, we did a lot of work around uh, coal auctions, mining auctions. A lot of work was done on power side, power grid, InvIT, we did REITs, we did many other things on the highway side. So many new innovative things have happened. I think that momentum must be uh, tripled and pushed harder, because
Hmm.
our belief is that there are certain areas where government will create infrastructure given the nature of it. Land acquisition is tough, approval is tough. Uh, and once the government has created those infrastructure, it's important that we bring in private sector, because operation and maintenance, the private sector is much better. Once revenue streams start coming in through a transparent process, we should be able to put them out into the market, and then operation maintenance over a longer period of time will be much more efficient in
Hmm.
India.
Hmm.
That should be our objective.
Right. What do you think? Why do you think did we slow down on asset monetization?
I don't think we've slowed down. We are still continuing. I just read that National Highway has done some new
So
investments.
it's been a success
Coal
in some
mines have been
ministry.
put out. Huge aggressive coal bids have taken place. Mining sector, there's a lot of advancement.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of new pushing has been done in many of these new areas of growth.
I want you to reflect on the 10 years of this government, and you've been at the forefront of several of the reforms that this government has tried to push through. If you were to assess the kind of the most significant reforms that India has unleashed in the last decade, which ones, according to you, are the most significant ones?
I think the most significant one is, when I was traveling across India while implementing the aspirational district program,
Mhm.
I think first and foremost, in the villages of India, I saw that all kacha houses have become pakka houses. That's huge transformation.
Mhm.
Number two, I think roads have reached every single rural village.
Mhm.
That's, to my mind, very important. The third, to my mind, which is very significant, is that DBT is taking place to the last mile. Every single person is getting direct benefit transfer,
Right.
and leakages have come to an end.
Mhm.
That's a huge achievement.
Mhm.
And fourthly, to my mind, opening up of the bank accounts in the name of women
Mhm.
has led to huge amount of financial inclusion,
Mhm.
and it has led to women empowerment,
Mhm.
and it has really led to credit flow. Microfinance
Right.
companies are today putting money into the hands of women,
Right.
and therefore women entrepreneurship is growing in rural areas. So these, to my mind, are the most significant transformations that have taken place in India.
So, as Prime Minister Modi gets ready for another election, and we have a whole host of state elections this year, general elections next year, what, according to you, should be the focus areas now as India starts or tries to make get into Amrit Kal? What the
Just
government?
focus on development, development, development. Because there's a completely new India. There's all young Indians.
Right.
It's a young India.
Correct.
And the young India wants growth, it wants progress, it wants development, and it is all seeing before its eyes that India has built 40 million houses,
Mhm.
that India has provided 110 million toilets, that India has provided 253 million piped water connection,
Mhm.
that it has built 88,000 kilometers of roads. Uh, all these are huge developments which have taken place in the last 7 to 8 years. That we've ensured digital fast payments, we've ensured DBT, 700 schemes of the government. We are putting money directly into the bank accounts, that we could do 2.2 billion COVID vaccination during the COVID period,
Mhm.
cashless and paperless. These are massive transformations that have taken place in the country.
Right.
And we should just focus on development. To my mind, that is what the young India wants.
So the current narrative that we see is also talking about reservations. It's also talking about Hindutva. And you talk about young India, and you interact so much with startups and aspirational youth of India. Do you think the time has come now for India to move beyond this narrative, and this narrative will not find as much traction as one would have, as it would have
No, no,
gotten maybe
I
10 or
think the
20 years
reason
ago?
why the Prime Minister's rating is still very high, in a democracy, to win 2 elections
Mhm.
and still retain a rating of over 75%
Right.
is because the people of India believe that good governance is good politics. And
Yeah.
therefore, my belief is that we should just focus on what is being done.
Mhm.
Continue the good work on developmental side. That will transform the lives of people.
Mhm.
We need to transform lives of citizens, and that is what is happening by increasing outlays on infrastructure. That will create a completely new demand. That will lead to greater credit. That will lead to greater growth.
Sure.
That will lead to India growing at higher rates. It's a cycle by itself,
Sure.
and that is what we need to push for.
Sure. So India now is more open than it has ever been.
Mm.
It is more linked to the global economy, and we see a global recession coming in. While India has displayed a lot of resilience until now, but there is a sense that the next 2 quarters are going to see a slowdown. I want to get your perspective in on what do you think will be the key growth driver for India, and in a scenario when globally growth is slowing down, what would be your growth prescription for India?
So, two things. One is that the global growth is going to slow down. There's no denying that. The global growth next year, unlike what IMF is predicting, to my mind, will not be more than 1.7%.
Mm-hmm.
But global growth, even if it slows down, India's share in the global uh, GDP has to keep rising. You know, every crisis is also an opportunity because others are slowing down. You are a young population, your demographics are young, and therefore this is an opportunity for us to really carry out all the reforms. This is an opportunity, much like what we did during COVID, that we didn't give out large packages. We brought in reforms. This is a period of great reformation for Indian society to do large-scale manufacturing, penetrate global markets, ensure that you are able to become a leading exporter in several key areas, get into all the sunrise areas of growth and become a global champion. We import $200 billion worth of fossil fuel.
Yeah.
We should be an exporter of energy, as the Prime Minister said. Climatically, we are blessed. We should produce renewables in India and then use renewables to crack water and produce green hydrogen. We should be a champion on export of green ammonia. We should be the biggest consumer of green hydrogen.
So these are the sunrise sectors?
Absolutely. Why should we not become a champion of electric vehicles? That is going to be the future. Why should we not manufacture batteries here? I mean, I'm glad that Tatas are doing it now.
Yeah.
Mahindras are driving electric vehicles. Tatas have driven electric vehicles in a very, very big way. They're getting into battery manufacturing now. So everybody is at the same level in India. Whoever takes the lead will become the champion now.
All right.
Because there is a huge amount of disruption taking place because of technology in many of these key areas of growth. And I think it's very important to accelerate the pace of disruption in some of these emerging areas of growth.
Okay. Today is a rare day in Delhi where now we are sitting outdoors. We are not concerned about the AQI levels that we are breathing. But over this last several years, 2 to 3 years, one thing that's become apparent is that climate change and pollution is a challenge that's staring at us in our faces, and we are doing very little about it. I want you to talk, you live in Delhi, I live in Delhi. What, according to you, are the solutions for Delhi's pollution challenge? And secondly, with COP28, what are your expectations from it, and what should be India's focus at COP28?
So first, let me say that India has done a lot. We do about 185 gigawatt of renewable. We're the only G20 countries amongst the climate change leaders. So we've done a bit. We are accelerating it further to 500 gigawatt, as has been laid down by Prime Minister in his vision. I think, to my mind, on several issues, we need to have very clear targets that by 2030 we should make all our two-wheelers and three-wheelers 100% electric. That should be our roadmap.
Okay.
There's 70% of the vehicles are two-wheelers, three-wheelers. We should say that the whole country should go electric by 2030. That will make us a manufacturing champion. The great thing that the government did was to have 10,000 buses which were to be provided through the urban affairs.
Right.
They said all of them will go electric. And we should actually do procurement of 50,000 buses and make India the champion of electric vehicles in India.
Mhm.
So pool all the demand of state governments and central government and say 50,000 buses
Mhm.
in the next 2 years. Make India the champion of electric vehicle buses manufacturing.
How
That's
about
it.
cab aggregators?
Yeah, everyone should go electric. That's because transport is your biggest polluter, to my mind.
Hmm.
And we are going after uh, diesel and petrol SUVs. All of them, they should be, to my mind, we should force all of them to go electric. It should be mandated, to my mind, that the country needs this. And
Mhm.
I mean, we've had the story of LA,
Right.
which went through a similar thing, was
Yeah.
able to transform.
Yeah.
We've
Yeah.
seen Shanghai and
Chicago. Chicago
Chicago.
River
We've
used
seen
to be. Yeah.
Beijing and
Yeah.
Shanghai. It
Yeah.
just needs a huge amount of administrative drive to clean it up. Why
Absolutely.
not? It should be done.
Absolutely.
It can.
Okay, shifting gears. How many hours did you work in a day, every day, for the last 1 year when you were, all every meeting you've been a part of, the G20 meetings? You've not slept last night. Also, we were just talking about it. How typically, what was your schedule like?
So during G20 period, it was tough. It was tough because we were negotiating different hours. We did about 35 meetings virtually
Mhm.
to clean up the draft, and that means odd hours, all nights, many hours. And then when we negotiated, those were sleepless nights. I mean, those we didn't sleep at all. So about 10 days we did negotiations round the clock. So, but it gives you a lot of satisfaction. You more than
Mhm.
make up for the lack of sleep by sheer satisfaction that you have delivered for your leader. Because I'm only a Sherpa, I work for my leader,
Right.
and we delivered that. So.
Mhm.
It gives you a job satisfaction. It gives you a job satisfaction that what the Prime Minister uh, aimed at in terms of an action oriented and an ambitious and an
Mhm.
inclusive and a decisive G20, we've delivered him that.
Mhm. Any lessons in negotiation? Your key learnings from this 1 year, and your key learnings from that 300 hours of negotiations that happened.
So, one is for a country like India, you need to always have other developing countries with you,
Mm.
which we did. We had all the developing and emerging markets with us.
Mm.
That's key. That gives you the strength. Secondly, uh, always maintain a personal relationship with the negotiators of other countries at a
Mhm.
personal level.
Mhm.
Thirdly, go back, be very thorough, learn, master what was their stand in previous negotiations.
Mhm.
How did they handle it so that you can argue it out well with them. That's important.
So good research, keep your
Absolutely.
allies close,
You should be very well.
and do your
Your
homework.
knowledge base of how others have negotiated is very important.
But how about managing stress? How about managing your emotions? Because you're really invested in it.
Yeah.
There is high level of stress that
So
you're working with.
I've
Did you
always,
do yoga? Did you meditate? What did you do
I
to stay centered?
I do about hour and a half of exercise. I do that. It's a discipline with me.
So you stuck to that schedule even when your hours
morning
were.
7 to 8:30, I keep to myself to just do actual physical exercise.
Mhm.
Because if you're not mentally fit, if you're not well, if you've not exercised, you're not up to it. Your mind will be clogged. So I strongly believe that if negotiations, you have to be bold, you have to be gutsy,
And you have to be
courageous.
polite, yet
Yes, it's
strong.
all that.
Yeah.
That's why I said personal relationship is very important, but all that requires you to be in the best of physical fitness.
So, Mr. Kant, so there is only so much time, right? Your work takes up so many hours. If you were to choose between sleep and working out, what would you choose?
Well, both. You can do both. You can sleep
Okay.
and you can do, but you must do workout. You can't say that I'm only going to work. Your
Ah.
work is a function of your ability to be mentally and physically fit.
Right.
And mentally and physically fit means that you must do some physical exercise.
All right.
Yeah.
Any
You must
advice?
maintain the balance of life.
Okay. Any advice for future negotiators and for future administrators?
Well, my only advice would be that be very thorough, be very well studied, be very well researched, and build up a very good relationship, build up alliances, get all emerging markets together. That's the key to the success. And be very open, be very frank, and be very forward-looking and progressive. If you're forward-looking, progressive, you'll be able to positively tell them that this is what we are aspiring for.
Mhm. So, what next for you, Mr. Kant? Do we see you take on greater responsibility in the government? What would you like to do, and what can we expect from India's star bureaucrat?
Well, I just want to play more golf now and improve my handicap.
Where in Delhi, I don't think you have the air quality to play golf regularly.
And travel around India and go to the Himalayas and do some trekking and walking around and just taking life easy.
No more books in the annual.
Well, I'll write one in due course. I'll be very happy to write.
So,
Writing I keep doing, so
Right.
I'll put it all together.
so have you thought about a topic that you'd like to write about?
No, not yet. Still thinking through it.
Do we see you joining the government
No.
in a greater capacity?
No, I've done lots of work in government. I've done about 44 years. I think I should take a breather and work outside government. And do my play games, walk around. There's a life outside government also.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Kant. It was a pleasure
Thank you.
talking to you as always. Thank you.
Thanks.